in this session today. Thank you for attending the course as well. This is a new week and we will have 2 sessions on today and on Thursday. I would like now to share a few housekeeping rules. As you know, you can choose the language you want to listen to at the bottom of the screen. The sessions are held in English and Spanish. As you know, this is a 7-week course that takes place every Tuesday and Thursday. Last week, you had a session with a case study and a TD research session. This week, or the first session, will be on TD research. And on Thursday, we'll be holding a session that includes a quick guide to write for a larger audience. Some general considerations. Please check regularly that your microphones are muted. Attendance will be verified when you are connected. You don't need to do anything else. If possible, we ask that your cameras remain on during the session. Due to time constraints, and this is more so today, only some questions will be answered in the final 15 minutes of the session, and the rest will be answered by email. The sessions last 90 minutes. Today, and for personal reasons, the case study presenter will go first. We will be showing a video. So the questions addressed to her will be answered at another time. After that, we will have the TV presentation, and then we will have 15 minutes for you to ask questions. And the rest of the questions will be answered by email. The sessions are recorded and are posted online on the website within 24 hours, and the reference materials are also included on the website. Please remember the following. Next week will be slightly different. On Tuesday, we will be working in smaller breakout rooms, so we will have the facilitators and their teams. So please prepare items 1 to 5 in the concept note. And also please prepare a brief slide presentation, 2 or 3 slides, in order to share your information with the other teams in the breakout rooms with your facilitators. Please remember to do this for Tuesday. And on Thursday, the groups will be divided according to the topics, so we will have thematic sessions. We are doing this in order to address the projects according to the topics. The idea is to improve your research objectives. Also, next week, individual participants will be able to choose which breakout room they would like to join. We are doing this in order to help you see which projects interest you, so that you can join a team as an individual decision maker. Facilitators will also be aiding this process. But please, the idea is that individual participants can actually go over the breakout room list, so that they can then join the rooms that have the teams they want to join. There will be interpretation only in room 3, okay? So that will be the English-Spanish room. The other rooms will only include Spanish. Today, first of all, we will be watching the case study video as presented by Professor Mercy Borbor Cordova. She's a professor at the Higher Polytechnic School of Ecuador, and she has wide experience in all these topics. And after that, I will introduce the other presenters. I will now stop sharing my screen.
Pueda compartir video. Gracias.
Hailey, please go ahead and share the video. Thank you very much.
Hailey.
Muy buenos días. Es un placer para mí estar con ustedes
Good
en
morning.
este
It's a
curso
pleasure for
de
me to be
respuesta en
with you
clima y
here in
ambiente
this
para la salud en
course
las Américas y para hacer la presentación de un
on
estudio de caso
response to
de
climate
la
change issues
resiliencia
in Latin
climática en
America
una
and to
ciudad
make a
latinoamericana,
presentation of a
Durán,
case study of
Ecuador,
climate
en la que
resilience in a
hemos
Latin
trabajado
American
por varios
city
años.
in Ecuador. And we have worked on this project for several years. My name is Mercy Warwar Cordova. I am a professor and researcher at the Polytechnic Higher School in Guayaquil, Ecuador.
La situación de las ciudades en América Latina
The situation of
es un
cities in
lugar
Latin
de muchos
America
retos y muchas
is
oportunidades.
very challenging and it
Pero en el
presents many
contexto
opportunities.
socioecológico de
But
las
in the
áreas urbanas,
socio-ecological context of urban
para
areas,
la salud humana
we
y para el
have
bienestar
issues
de
of
los
vital
habitantes.
importance for human
En
health and the
este
welfare of
contexto,
inhabitants.
justamente, el
In
cambio
this
climático
context,
puede
climate change
exacerbar
can
los desafíos
exacerbate
existentes en la vida
existing
urbana,
challenges in
desde
urban
la
life,
desigualdad
including
social,
social
el estrés
inequality, urban
epidemias,
stress,
la demanda de
epidemics,
interés social,
demand for
el
social
deterioro de la
interest,
infraestructura y la
deterioration of
degradación del
infrastructure,
ecosistema.
degradation of
Y es también
ecosystems.
aquí donde los alcaldes
And
y
it's
los
also
gobiernos
here that
locales
mayors
deben
and
tomar
local
decisiones
governments
informadas
must make
para poder
informed
reducir el
decisions to
impacto
reduce
de
the
la
impact
pandemia,
of
de los
the
efectos del cambio
pandemic,
climático
of
y
the
para que
effects
se
of
puedan
climate
recuperar.
change,
¿Por qué?
and so that
Porque
people
tienen la
can
competencia
recover.
en el
Why?
uso del
Because they
territorio,
have
en
the
la gestión de
competencies when it
riesgos
comes
de
to using the
desastres, en la
territory,
provisión de servicios
also
básicos,
regarding
en
disaster
los
risk
ecosistemas de
management,
salud
when it
y en
comes
la
to
provisión
providing
de
basic
alimentos y atención a
services,
grupos
in
vulnerables.
the health
Todo esto
subsystems,
tiene
and in
relación
providing food and
directa
attention to
con
vulnerable
el
groups. All
efecto y
this
el
is related
impacto
to the
en la salud
effect and
pública.
impact on public health.
Les voy a contar
Now I
cómo
would like
fue
to
el
tell you about
proceso
the
que se dio
process,
para la colaboración
the
entre el
collaboration
centro
process
para el cual yo
between the
trabajo, que es el Centro
center where I
Internacional del
work, which is the
Pacífico para
International
la
Pacific
Reducción de
Center for
Riesgos de
Disaster
Desastre,
Risk
con
Reduction,
un municipio local
with a
de la ciudad de
local
Durán,
collaboration with the
y
local
para
municipalities
generar
in the
este
city of
proyecto que le
Durán.
llamamos Resclima.
And we
Y esto
created a
empezó
project called
en
Resclima.
2016,
This started in
cuando nosotros
2016.
estábamos dando un taller de
We
sistemas de
were,
información
we had
geográfica a
organized a
diferentes
workshop on geographic
municipios,
information
trabajando con
systems,
mapas de ellos y para obtener la
addressing different
vulnerabilidad y entender un poco más
municipalities.
el
We worked
contexto de
with
cada
maps
ciudad.
and we helped
Fue
them
ahí
obtain the
cuando hubo un
vulnerability and understand
acercamiento
the
entre el
context of
grupo
each
del
city.
municipio de riesgos de Durán
Then
y
we
nuestro
talked
centro.
to the
Y
municipality of
empezamos a
Durán and
trabajar en
our center.
conjunto para
And we started
formular el
working
problema.
together to,
Empezamos a desarrollar un proceso
develop the
metodológico en
problem. We
función de las
began to develop
prioridades
a
que ellos
methodological
tenían
process
y de
based on
las
the priorities
habilidades
they
y del
had and the
conocimiento
skills
de
and
nuestra
knowledge
experticia.
of our
Y así fue
expertise.
que trabajando entre
And so it was that
2016 y
working between
2017,
2016 and
finalmente
2017, we
encontramos y
finally
desarrollamos
found
la propuesta
and
de
developed the
resiliencia
climate
climática
resilience
para la
proposal
ciudad.
for the city.
Pero nos tomó todavía
But
casi
it
un
still took
año
us
para
almost a
completar
year
lo
to
que correspondió a
complete
una firma de un convenio de
the
trabajo
signing of an
interinstitucional, ¿no?,
interinstitutional working
entre el
agreement
municipio
between the
y la
municipality
universidad,
and the
que se firmó
university.
justamente
This
en
was
el
signed in
2018.
2018.
En este convenio teníamos
In the
nosotros
agreement, we
también
had specific
roles específicos, contrapartes específicas,
specific
pero también
counterparts, but
aportes
also
financieros de
financial
cada uno de ellos.
contributions from
Y así
each
inició el proyecto
party.
Resclima
And
de
this is how
Durán
the
en el
Resclima project
2018.
in Durán began in
Posterior a eso,
2018.
hemos tenido la
After
oportunidad de
that, we have had
trabajar
the opportunity to work
en
on
muchos
many
otros
other
proyectos, como por
projects.
ejemplo
For
el
example,
de
the
Sistema
early
de
warning
Alertas Tempranas
system
para
for
Inundaciones,
floods
que está desde el 2019 hasta el
between
2021,
2019
y
and
el de
2021,
insumo de Sistema de
and
Alertas
the
Tempranas
project
para
on the
la
inputs of the early warning
COVID-19, porque
system for
justamente empezó la
COVID-19,
pandemia y ahora en
because
este
the
momento estamos
pandemic
trabajando
began
con
at
un
the time,
sistema de
and
alerta
now we're
temprana para
working with an early
implementación
warning system
en el año
to be
que corre
implemented
hasta el
in
2024.
2023
La
that will
ciudad de
run until
Durán es
2024.
una ciudad
The
vulnerable
city
al
of
clima,
Durán is a
como
climate
muchas otras
vulnerable
ciudades
city
en
like
América
many
Latina.
other cities in
Tiene
Latin
300.000
America.
habitantes y
It
está
has
situado
300,000
en el Golfo de
inhabitants and is
Guayaquil,
located in the
que es
Gulf
el
of
golfo más grande
Guayaquil,
del
the
Pacífico Sur,
largest gulf
y
in the
que
South
tiene
Pacific.
muchos elementos
It
que
has
tienen
many
otras
elements
ciudades.
that other
Está
cities have
sujeto a
as well.
inundaciones y está cubierta
Floods,
por
it is
canales
covered
por
by
toda la ciudad.
canals,
Tiene zonas muy bajas,
throughout the
zonas de
city. It
manglares que
has
fueron
shallow areas,
degradadas
mangrove
y
areas
tiene
that were
muchos
degraded,
asentamientos
and
informales,
also many informal
donde la mayor
settlements
parte de
where
la
most of the
población, una gran parte de la población, sufre de falta de infraestructura, tiene bajos niveles de
from lack of
educación, hay
infrastructure,
niveles de
low
pobreza y de
levels of
inequidad y
education,
las
there are also
viviendas
levels
realmente
of
son
poverty and
precarias.
inequality,
En
and
estas
housing
condiciones,
is
las
poor. In
precipitaciones
these
producen
conditions, rainfall
inundaciones
creates
y eventos
floods,
extremos como el
and
Niño
also extreme
pueden
events
producir
such as El
inundaciones que
Niño can
afectan
produce
directa
floods
e
that directly
indirectamente la
and
salud
indirectly
a
affect
través de las
people's health
enfermedades vectoriales,
in the form of
infecciosas,
respiratory and
respiratorias y
other
otras que también están
vector-borne
asociadas al
diseases,
calor.
infectious diseases, and all other diseases
Pero,
that are
¿cómo
also
entonces empezamos a hacer esta
heat-related.
investigación
But then,
transdisciplinaria,
how do
¿no?
we
en esta
begin this
ciudad?
TD research in the
Básicamente
city?
vamos nosotros a
Basically,
enfocarnos en tres aspectos
we
importantes.
focus,
El primero
now
es
I
que
would like to
vamos a
focus on
interactuar
three
con los
essential
actores.
aspects.
Y
First
para
of all,
eso
we
vamos
needed
a
to
ir
interact
generando
with the
un
stakeholders.
proceso
And to do
iterativo y un
that, we needed
proceso
to
de
create an
coproducción, es
interactive
decir,
process and
trabajar
a
juntos para
co-production
definir
process. That is to
productos
say, we
finales
worked
que son
together
realmente
to
desarrollados
define
por los
final
varios
products that are
actores que
developed by
intervienen.
the
El
several
otro es
stakeholders
trabajar
involved.
con una
The
ciencia
other
usable, una
is
ciencia
to,
útil, una ciencia que
the
va a
other factor is
resolver
to
un
work with
problema
the use,
específico
science with the
del
use, sound
usuario
science
final,
that
en
will
este
solve a
caso el
specific
gobierno
problem
local,
that
el
the end user
municipio
has, in
o el
this case, the
grupo
local
al cual
government,
estamos
the
trabajando.
municipality, or the
Y
group we're
en
working with.
para este
For this
efecto vamos a tener que
purpose,
utilizar
we will have
diferentes
to
disciplinas. Por lo
implement
tanto,
different
interviene la
disciplines.
interdisciplinaridad.
Therefore, this is when interdisciplinarity comes
Vamos a
in.
hacer la primera pregunta para
Let us
ustedes.
ask the
¿Qué
first question.
factores ustedes creen que
Which
son
factors do you think
relevantes
are
para un
relevant
acercamiento
so
entre
that
investigadores
researchers
y en
and
este
local
caso
governments or local
gobiernos
groups
locales
can
o grupos locales?
get together?
1. Confianza. 2.
First of
Intereses
all,
comunes y
first,
beneficios.
trust.
3.
2, common
Arreglos
interests and
institucionales.
benefits. 3, institutional
4.
arrangements.
Liderazgo y
4,
proactividad, la
leadership and
presencia del champion.
proactivity, the presence of the
5. Un
champion.
marco
And
normativo
5,
y
a
de política.
regulatory and
Escojan
policy
3
framework.
los que ustedes creen que son
Please
los
choose
más
the
relevantes.
options that you believe are the most relevant.
Entonces ahora les voy a preguntar, ¿cuál fue el enfoque de este
Now,
marco
I would like
metodológico
to
del
ask
proyecto
you
Resclima, ¿no?
which was the
Resiliencia
focus of this
climática para Durán,
methodological
que
framework of the
nosotros usamos?
Resclima
¿no?
project
Tenía
as we
diferentes
implemented
métodos
it.
para
The
interoperar
project
diferentes
included
datos.
different methods
Y aquí,
to
en ese
be able to
diagrama que ustedes ven, van a ver que
several
en la
data.
primera caja 1000
In this
dice
diagram
multiamenaza,
you will see
donde
that the
analizábamos
first
tres tipos de amenazas:
box
las
where it
inundaciones,
says
las islas
1000,
urbanas
we
de calor
analyze
y los
multi-hazards.
deslizamientos.
Floods,
En el
urban heat
componente
islands, and
2, que está
landslides.
en el otro lado de la
Component
pantalla, ustedes
3,
van a ver lo que es
which
análisis
is on
de
the other
riesgo
side
y
of the screen.
vulnerabilidad, porque nos
This shows the
interesaba
risk of
determinar
vulnerability
dónde la
analysis because we
ciudad
were
y
interested in
sus
determining
habitantes
where the
eran más
city and its
vulnerables y
inhabitants
cuál era su
were
riesgo
most
a estas
vulnerable
amenazas que
and what
decimos.
was their risk level to
3000
these
era luego,
hazards.
viene el componente que
3000
se
was the
corresponde a cómo
component
definimos las estrategias
that
para la
corresponds
resiliencia,
to
pero
how we
esto
define
tenía
the
que ser en un
resilience
proceso
strategies.
participativo, en un
But
diálogo
we
con
needed
los
a
actores.
participatory
Y lo que
process. We
teníamos en
needed
el
to talk to
componente 4000
stakeholders.
es
And
la Data
component
City, que es
4000,
básicamente
we
una
have the
plataforma
Data
tecnológica
City,
que
which
nos
is a
permitía
technological
poner los
platform that
mapas y la
allowed us to
información y
place
datos y los
maps and
análisis
information
de
and
cada
data
uno de los
and the
componentes
analysis of
para
each of the
poder
components
visualizar un
in
poco
order to
y poder
visualize
interoperar nuestros datos. Con todos
and
estos
interoperate
elementos
our
en este
data.
proceso
We
participativo,
had all these
nosotros lo
elements
que
of this participatory
entendíamos al
process.
final
So
es
we
que
understood
podíamos
at the
encontrar
end is that we could
algunas
find some
estrategias. Y
strategies.
aquí está un poco lo que encontramos al
Please
final.
have a look at
Temas
what
de
we
planificación
found at the end
urbana y
of
adaptación,
the planning
información y
stage.
conocimiento, y
Issues of
también
urban
temas de
planning,
gobernanza
adaptation,
y de
information
construcción social.
and knowledge, and also governance and
Entonces,
social
nosotros
construction
utilizamos un
issues.
enfoque holístico para el riesgo
So,
climático que
we
se basa en
implemented a
estos dos
holistic approach
componentes,
to
el
climate
de la
change
amenaza,
that
en
is
este
based
caso
on these two
climático, y el de la
components. In this
vulnerabilidad.
case,
Los dos juntos y su interacción me produce el riesgo
risk and
climático,
vulnerability.
pero la
Both of them
vulnerabilidad
create
está
climate
formada de
risk,
tres
but vulnerability is
componentes.
made up
Uno, la
of three
exposición a
components.
esa
One
amenaza
is the
climática.
exposure
Dos, la
to that
sensibilidad
climate
del
hazard.
sistema humano
Two
o de la
is
ciudad.
the
Y tres, la
sensitivity of
capacidad
the human system of the
adaptativa
city.
que
And three,
tenía
the
el
adaptive
sistema con
capacity
respecto
of
a
the system when
responder
it comes
a
to
esas amenazas
responding to
climáticas.
those
Ahí
climate
vemos
hazards.
algunos ejemplos de la exposición está
Here are
asociada
some
con el clima,
examples of
la
the
sensibilidad con las personas del
climate-related
sistema
exposure,
urbano y la
sensitivity with the people
capacidad
in the urban
adaptativa
system,
con la
and the adaptive
capacidad de
capacity,
respuesta. Pero lo vamos a
and
ver un
also the
poco mejor
response
en el
capacity.
siguiente slide.
We will
En
see
este diagrama lo
this
que
in
queremos
more
ver
detail
dos
in the next
cosas es,
slide.
uno, que en nuestro enfoque Vamos a
Now
trabajar
we would like
con
to focus on two
información
things.
de
First, in our
diferentes
approach, we
disciplinas,
will work with
pero también
information from
vamos a
different
tener que
disciplines.
integrar
But we're also
datos de
going
alguna
to
manera
integrate
y
data in
combinarlos, y
some
algunos
way
vienen
and
en
also
escalas y
combine
formatos
them.
diferentes.
Some
Entonces,
have
por
different
ejemplo,
scales
en
and
el
different
diagrama
formats.
decimos
So,
que
for
tenemos
instance,
la
have a
amenaza
look at
climática
this
o el peligro
diagram. We
climático,
have the
pero
climate
también
threat or
podría
the
ser el
climate
efecto del
hazard,
COVID
but it could
acumulado, es
also
decir,
be the
varias amenazas
accumulated
ahí.
COVID
Y ahí
effect,
están
that
esos
is to
tres
say
factores
several
que
threats
hablábamos: la
together.
exposición,
And these are the
la
three factors.
sensibilidad
We have
y la
exposure,
capacidad adaptativa.
sensitivity,
Donde la
and
exposición,
adaptive
por ejemplo,
capacity.
que es factores climáticos,
Exposure, for
tenemos los
instance,
números de
which is a
días que
climate
hay
factors,
mucho calor
includes
o mucha
the
precipitación,
number of
la
days
frecuencia de los eventos
when it's
extremos
very
que producen
hot,
las
or
inundaciones.
the
En la
precipitation levels, or the
sensibilidad
frequency of
tenemos
extreme
la
events that
demografía, si
produce
son niños,
floods.
si son personas
Sensitivity includes
adultas,
demographics, if they're
ancianos, ¿no?
children, if they're
También
adults,
la
if they're elderly
precondición,
people.
¿no? Si tienen
Also,
algún problema de inmunidad, algún
preconditions, if
problema
they
de
have some sort of
discapacidad, entonces
immunity
eso
or
también es una
health
sensibilidad
or
de la población o de los
disability
individuos
problem.
y de
And
los
this is
servicios que tiene la
And we
ciudad,
also
como
consider the
servicio de
services
alcantarillado, agua
included in the
potable,
city,
de
for
la
instance,
basura,
sewage services, drinking
los tipos de
water,
vivienda que
garbage
tiene,
collection,
y la
the
capacidad
types of
adaptativa está más
housing that the
relacionado
city
con los
has.
temas de
The
educación,
adaptive capacity is
organización
more related
y
to
acceso a la
education,
información y a
organization,
la
and access to
tecnología.
information and
Todo
technology
eso
issues.
hace un factor de vulnerabilidad.
This makes
Y
up a
esa
vulnerability factor.
vulnerabilidad
This
puede ser individual,
vulnerability
no
can
puede
be
ser de la
individual,
comunidad,
it
puede
cannot
ser
be a
institucional,
community
pero que conjuntamente con la amenaza
vulnerability. It can
climática
also
o
be
ese
institutional,
peligro
but
que ya
together
lo
with the
estamos
climate
estudiando de otra
threat or
manera,
the danger that we're already
nos
studying in
conforma
a
el
different
riesgo
way,
climático. Y ese riesgo
this makes up the
climático va a
climate
producir
risk. And this climate risk
impactos
will,
en la salud,
have an
impactos en
impact
la
on
economía
health, an
e
impact on
impacto
the
en las
economy,
condiciones
and
sociales.
it will
El
also
objetivo
impact
nuestro era
social
determinar
conditions. Our
justamente
objective was to
cuáles son
determine
esos factores
precisely
determinantes
which are
de
those
esa
determining
vulnerabilidad y
factors,
ese riesgo
that
climático de
vulnerability and
nuestra
that
ciudad.
climate risk in our city.
Bien, y en esta lámina lo que vemos es justamente algunos
In this
elementos
slide, we can
específicos de
see
esa
some
disposición, de
specific
esa
elements
sensibilidad
within
y de
that
esa capacidad adaptativa,
sensitivity
donde
and that
van a ver
adaptive
ustedes que se
capacity.
tratan de
You
diferentes
will see
disciplinas:
here that we are dealing
meteorología,
with different
geomorfología,
disciplines, meteorology,
topografía,
geology,
diferentes
topography,
eventos
various
climáticos, mientras que
climate
sensibilidad
events.
estamos hablando con factores
However,
sociales, con
sensitivity
factores
has to do
demográficos, con una
with
estructura
social
de la
factors,
población,
demographic
que generalmente
factors,
lo
with
vamos a ver
a
por
population
censo,
structure,
mientras que la
and we
capacidad adaptativa es una
usually see
información
this
que a
through
veces se obtiene
surveys.
directamente de las
Adaptive capacity
fuentes,
is
como en este
information
caso el
obtained
gobierno
directly from
local, o a
sources, as
veces
in
si hay
this
un
case
poco
a
más de
local
esfuerzo
government,
lo
or
vamos a hacer
sometimes
directamente con la comunidad. En nuestro caso lo
if there
hicimos
is more work, we can
mayormente
do this
con
directly with
el
the
gobierno
community.
local y en
We did this
algunos
mostly
puntos
with the
específicos
local
con
government, and
información
in some
que
specific
obtuvimos de la comunidad.
points we used
Lo que
information we
nosotros
obtained from
vimos
the community.
básicamente era que
We found
encontramos
basically
que
that
las zonas de mayor vulnerabilidad que
that
ustedes
the
ven
areas
ahí
of
en rojo
greatest
en el diagrama
vulnerability that
A,
you see there in red
básicamente
in
están
diagram A
totalmente
are
correlacionados con las zonas de
fully
asentamientos
correlated with the
informales.
areas of
Pero
informal
también
settlements.
encontramos
But we
que
also found
justamente
that
esa
this
zona
area
es donde están las
is
poblaciones menores de
precisely
14 años, como lo
where
vemos
we
en la figura B.
have
Y básicamente lo que
younger
estamos
than
viendo
14
ahí es
years
que los
old.
niños
And
están
basically what we
justamente
see is
expuestos
that
a
children
problemas
are
de
exposed
gran vulnerabilidad
to
climática y por lo tanto van a estar
climate
afectados
vulnerability
con las
issues,
enfermedades
so they will
vectoriales,
be
las diarreicas,
affected
las
by
respiratorias,
vector-borne
y es un
diseases,
esfuerzo que tenemos que hacer para
diarrhea,
mapear
respiratory
exactamente
diseases,
dónde
and we
se
need to make
encuentra
an
para
effort in
generar
order to map
programas de
where
salud pública
these
diseñados
diseases in order
específicamente
to
para esa población.
design specific
Y estos son algunos de los
programs.
mapas que nosotros obtuvimos,
These are
que son
some of the
estos
maps
mapas
that
de
we
riesgo de
obtained,
inundaciones,
and these
¿no?
are the
Donde
flood
están
risk
las
maps.
zonas
These
rojas,
are
son las zonas
some
de
of
mayor
the
riesgo de
Here
inundación,
we have
y
the
las
red
azules son las que
areas
tienen
or
muy
the
bajo,
that we
y los
created.
puntitos y esas
most
marcas
In blue,
corresponden
we
a diferentes
show the
tipos de
very
comercios,
low
en este caso, en el caso de
areas.
inundaciones, pero también lo hicimos para las islas de
Then
calor, que
we
eran las
also
zonas donde
show
había mayores
shops and
temperaturas
commercial
comparadas con las
spaces.
zonas
We also
urbanas, y ahí lo que
included in the
comparamos
map
es esas
areas
zonas de
with
alta
high heat.
temperatura en la ciudad
And we compared
con
those
la
areas
ubicación de las
with the
escuelas
high
para saber
temperatures,
cómo estas escuelas,
and we
unas
mapped the
públicas y
locations
otras
of
no,
schools,
están
some public
expuestas y
schools
qué podría
and
pasar
private schools,
en momentos en que se
to
pueda hacer una alerta pues de un evento de calor extremo.
see if they would
Aquí,
have
por ejemplo,
exposure
podemos
in
ver
case
un
of an
mapa de
extreme
riesgo
heat
para islas de calor
event.
urbano, donde lo que
Here
hemos
we can
utilizado
see
son
a
sensores
map
remotos.
of
Entonces, los sensores
urban
remotos
heat
nos permiten
islands,
ver
and we
justamente realmente
created
una
this using
información
remote
de alta resolución
provide
para saber
high
qué pasa,
resolution
dónde están las
information
mayores temperaturas. Pero verificamos eso tanto
to know
utilizando
what
imágenes
happens in
satelitales
areas
como
with higher
también
temperature, and we
imágenes
also
como
include
recorriendo el
included
territorio. Y lo que nos dimos
satellite
cuenta
images,
es
and we
que
also
las zonas que
information
todavía no
gathered
tienen
from
grande
going into
degradación
the
del uso
territory,
del
into
suelo,
the
donde
fields.
todavía tenemos
And we
zonas
realized
verdes
that
o
in areas
remanentes de
with
vegetación,
low
tienen
soil
temperaturas más
degradation,
bajas
where
que
there still
aquellas
are
zonas que son
green
altamente
spaces,
consolidadas y con mucha
have
verificación.
lower
Entonces,
temperatures
todo
than
esto hay que
those that have been
entenderlo para poder
consolidated and
diseñar
have
la
lots of
planificación
urban
urbana y
development.
las
And this
políticas que sean
needs to be
adecuadas
taken
para
into
una
account
mejor
to develop
planificación de la ciudad y
urban
de
planning
los diseños de las
policies
áreas
and
verdes,
to
por
plan the
ejemplo, para
city
poder
and
mejorar el
green
bienestar
areas
de la población.
appropriately to improve the
En
well-being
esta
of the
lámina lo
population.
que hemos tratado de representar
In this
es una
slide,
agregación de diferente
we
información.
try to
Hemos
show
utilizado sistemas de
all of this
informaciones espaciales
information
con
aggregated. We
imágenes
use
raster que
space
llegamos a una unidad
information,
espacial de escala de
images.
census tract, de
We
escala
reached
censal,
a
para poner
census
información
scale
demográfica,
of
de
information
precipitaciones, de temperaturas, pero
to
también
show information
epidemiológica,
about
de tal manera
rainfall,
que haciendo
temperatures,
algún tipo de
but also
análisis estadístico
epidemiological
podemos
information in order
determinar
to
si hay alguna
do
relación entre
statistical
algunas
analysis and
enfermedades
to
infecciosas
learn
o
whether there is any
respiratorias
connection
con
between
alguna
some
ubicación espacial de
diseases,
la ciudad,
infectious
¿no? Y
diseases,
también hemos hecho
or
series de tiempo
communicable
para que nos
diseases,
permita ver
and all
justamente
of these
cómo hay esa
factors and the
variabilidad
location in
de
the
las
cities. And
enfermedades,
so
como
we
por
can
ejemplo
see
el
the
Zika y el
variability of
chikungunya, que
some
aumenta
diseases such as
justamente en la estacionalidad
Zika
del
and
calor. ¿Qué es lo
chikungunya,
que hemos encontrado? Que los
which
casos de
are
dengue están
increased
relacionados
during
con
the hot
temperaturas
seasons.
mínimas, ¿no?
For
Cuando estas
example,
aumentan,
dengue is
también
connected to
aumentan casos de
temperatures. When
dengue, que
temperature
el Zika
increases,
está relacionado
also
con la variación de la
dengue cases
precipitación
increase.
y también con la
Zika
temperatura
is also
mínima, y que
related
las
to
enfermedades
variations
vectoriales,
in
las
rainfall and
cardiovasculares y las
temperatures.
respiratorias,
And
aumentan en años extremos,
cardiovascular and
¿no? Como por
respiratory
ejemplo
disease
pasó en
also
el niño
increase
2010 y en el
during some
2015.
periods.
Toda
For
esta
example,
relevancia
in
de factores
extreme
nos ayuda a
years such as
identificar
the
sistemas de
one due to El
inequidad,
Niño in
vulnerabilidad
2015.
social o biofísica,
So
para
we
luego
also
emprender y poder
connect this
diseñar
to
programas de salud o de promoción de la salud.
vulnerabilities such as
Ahora, en
inequity
la ciencia
and
transdisciplinar
problems in the
estamos
healthcare system.
trabajando básicamente dos grupos,
We
el grupo
are
de
working
ciencia y el grupo de
basically
actores, y luego tenemos que trabajar
in
entre los dos
transdisciplinary
grupos.
science.
Entonces, los
We
procesos
have
metodológicos son
scientists,
diferentes, las
researchers,
estrategias para
and the
poder relacionarnos
community
son diferentes,
stakeholders.
y
So
nosotros lo que hemos
the
utilizado
ways in which we relate
diferentes
to each other are
enfoques, por
different. So
ejemplo,
we have
para
used
trabajar un
different
poco
approaches.
en definir cuáles
For
eran las
example,
estrategias con la
to try and
comunidad y con los
define the
actores de
strategies to work
gobierno
with the
local, se
community
utilizó
and
el
local
pensamiento
government
de diseño, el
stakeholders.
design
We
thinking,
use
para
design
poder
thinking
identificar el problema,
in
los
order to be able
factores de
to
la
identify
vulnerabilidad
the
y las
issue,
prioridades que cada
vulnerability
uno
factors,
de
and
los
the
actores
vulnerabilities
percibía.
that each
En
of
ese
the
proceso de
stakeholders
coproducción con
could
diferentes
notice.
actores
And
también
in that
tuvimos la oportunidad
co-production
de validar
process
los
with
mapas.
different
Y es
stakeholders,
interesante ver
we were
que
also able
mucha de
to
la
validate these
comunidad no
maps.
entendía bien
And
el
it's
tema de los
interesting,
mapas,
it was
entonces
interesting
había
to
que
see that
explicar y
a lot of
trabajar un
community
poco más
members
para
didn't
poder
understand
identificar y
the
más bien
maps
hacer
very
como
well. So
mapas
we worked at
específicos por ellos
trying
mismos
to
que
make
podían darnos un
specific
poco más de
maps
información.
with their
Entre los
input
resultados curiosos que nosotros
to provide
obtuvimos es
better
que mientras los
information.
funcionarios y los investigadores de diferentes
And something
disciplinas
interesting
a
we
veces
found is that
preferíamos las soluciones
even though
técnicas, la
researchers
prioridad de la
and some
comunidad
officials
fue más
from
bien
different
enfocado
areas
hacia el
sometimes
empoderamiento,
preferred
la
a more
organización
technical
social
solution,
y hacia la
the community
salud
focused
de
more
su comunidad.
on empowering the
Pero
community
bien, habiéndoles
and
contado
taking
un
care of the
poco lo que
health of
nosotros
the
vivimos en
community.
ese proceso del proyecto
So,
Rescliva,
having
voy a
discussed a
tratar
little
de
bit of
poner
what
en este
we
diagrama,
experienced in
¿no?
this
cuál fue el
project,
proceso de
in this
coproducción
chart,
que
I'm going to show
trabajamos
the
acá. Y creo que
co-production
estos procesos
process that we
abarcaban
worked
estos
on.
tres elementos que
And
ponemos ahí arriba. El
it
primero
covered
es la
these
gestión
three
del
elements
conocimiento
that are
aplicable,
at the
que
top.
va enfocado a
The
una
first
solución
one is
específica. En este
managing
caso,
applied
encontrar
knowledge,
cuáles son los
applied
sitios de
to
más
a specific
inundación, cuáles son
solution,
los sitios donde
which
las
was to
personas
find
son más
the
vulnerables
areas
a la
that are more
temperatura,
prone to
¿no?
floods,
Para lo
to
cual teníamos que
identify the
utilizar
people that
diferentes
are the most
disciplinas.
sensitive
Luego,
to
el
heat.
segundo, el fortalecimiento de las
Then the
capacidades. Fue bien
second one
importante
was
porque
strengthening
teníamos que
capacities.
buscar la
And
manera
this
de
is
que
very
todos
important
entendamos
because we
y
needed to
encontramos
find a
en los
way
sistemas de información
so that
geográfica
for
una
everyone to
manera
understand each
común
other.
para poder
And
trabajar todos en
so
el
we
mismo
found a common way
misma,
of working
en el mismo formato, en una misma escala, y
with the
aprendimos a
same
hacer
format
índices para poder poder
with the same
comparar
scale,
una
we
variable con
learn
otra.
to
Y
create
finalmente, y
indices
bien
to
importante,
compare
es el tema de
variables.
los arreglos
And
institucionales y
something very
sociales. Estos
important is
institucionales que a veces
institutional and
fueron
social
memorandos de
arrangements.
entendimiento formales,
These
con transferencias
sometimes
de
included
dineros, con tiempos específicos,
formal
pero también estos
agreements
arreglos
with
sociales
money
con la comunidad,
transfers,
cuando se
but
establecieron, por
also some
ejemplo, los
specific
comités
things in the
de primeros
community,
auxilios o los comités de
some
reducción de riesgo
committees,
para
first
poder
aid committees
organizarlos
or
un
risk
poco
reduction
en su
committees
territorio.
that
Las lecciones que nosotros
organize
tenemos ahí
communities
es
in the
que
territory.
deberíamos tener
And what we
una
see
buena
here is
gobernanza
that it's
entre
very
estos
important to
actores
have
y para
good
eso es
governance
favorable
between these
desarrollar visiones
stakeholders.
comunes,
And for this,
encontrar
we
cuáles
need to
son,
develop a
cuáles son esas
common
prioridades
vision,
que tenemos identificadas,
identify the
esa
priorities,
capacitación
to
continua y
have
esa extensión, es decir, un
continuous
acompañamiento
training
permanente y
and
finalmente
also
dar esta
constant
oportunidad
outreach,
de la voz
and
de los
also
consejos
to give a
participativos o los
voice and
comités que vienen
opportunity
de la comunidad que
to
pueden dialogar
participatory
tanto con
committees
los
from the
gobiernos locales, pero
community,
también donde la
to
academia
have them
puede ayudar
interact
a
both
ser
with
un
the local
interlocutor.
government
Entonces
and
ahí
academia.
logramos mejores formas de
And
aprendizaje,
that
de
is how
usabilidad de
we
la
found
información
better
e incluso
results and
logramos
better
gestionar procesos de
usability in
monitoreo
our
para que en
information,
algún
and we
momento
were
podamos
able
hacer
to
procesos de más evaluación.
organize
Al
follow-up
cabo de casi
and
2 años y
monitoring
medio, casi 3
procedures.
años, también pudimos
After
trabajar
almost 2
un
years,
policy
2.5
brief, un
years,
informe de
almost 3,
política, porque
we
lo
were
relevante de
also
todo
able
este
to work
trabajo,
on
en
a
este caso
policy
con el gobierno
brief,
local, con la comunidad, era
because all
poder
of this
establecer
work with the local
esta
community, the
investigación que
local
se traduzca en
government,
una acción para generar un
were,
insumo para la
our
política, ¿no?
work
De la
also
ciencia
had the
a la
purpose
política,
of
en
creating some
este
input for
nexo que tenemos entre el
policymakers.
clima, ambiente
In
y la
this
salud.
connection,
Y en
about this
este
connection
policy brief,
between
este informe de políticas,
health, the
nosotros hicimos
climate,
5
and the
recomendaciones que
environment.
están ahí, ¿no? La
And so
una,
we
que es el
issued
tema de
these 5
trabajar con los temas de reducción de
recommendations.
riesgo
The
y con los
first
temas de
one
adaptación al cambio
was
climático,
to
pero en los
work
planes de ordenamiento
on
territorial. El segundo, que es
risk
fortalecer la,
reduction issues and
la
climate change
gobernanza institucional
adaptation.
y la
The
capacidad
second
social de las
one, to
comunidades,
strengthen
creando
institutional
liderazgo, escuelas de
governance
líderes,
and the social
organización.
capacity of
El
communities
objetivo número 3
by
era
creating
incorporar la
leadership
gestión del
schools for
conocimiento y la innovación
leaders
urbana,
of
lo cual se
organizations.
favorece con estas
The
alianzas
third one was to
estratégicas con
incorporate knowledge
universidades y
management
centros de
and urban
investigación local.
innovation,
Y el últtimo objetivo
which is
era
favored with the
incorporar en la
strategic
planificación de la
alliances with
ciudad el
universities
diseño del
and
paisaje, los
local research
ecosistemas
centers.
y el
And
tema
the fourth one
innovador de soluciones basadas en la
was to
naturaleza como un
incorporate
tema de
into city
un ambiente
planning
sano
the
y de
landscape
mejorar
design,
la
the design
salud
of
de la población,
ecosystems,
¿no? A la vez
and
que
the innovative
mejoramos el
theme
ambiente de la
of
ciudad.
nature-based solutions.
En este diagrama hemos querido representar un poco
In
también
this
esta
chart,
visión
we
de
also
la
wanted to
intersectorialidad,
represent
de cómo
this
podemos incorporar
vision of
estos datos, y hemos
intersectoriality,
mencionado
to
los sistemas de información geográfico, ¿no? Para
incorporating
poder
this data.
establecer
I
datos
have mentioned the
demográficos, los
geographic
datos de
information
sensores remotos,
system,
pero también aquí en el
to
centro lo que nosotros
use
hemos
the
hecho también
geographic
trabajar
data
con el
and
grupo de
remote sensor
tecnología, ¿no?
data,
Del Centro de Innovación
but
Tecnológica,
in the
que lo que ha
center,
hecho son
we
aplicaciones
also
que
have
han sido
worked
utilizadas
on
para, por
apps
ejemplo,
that
tomar
have been
datos
used, for
de
example, to
clima o
gather and
de
collect
factores
data
meteorológicos, pero también para
from weather
monitorear
factors,
directamente
and
la
also
observación de
to
las
directly
inundaciones o de
monitor
algún evento dentro de
observations
la
of
comunidad,
floods
¿no?
or some other event within
Esto
the
fue
community.
interesante porque nosotros
And this
pensábamos que
was
era más fácil
interesting
de
because
lo que
we
realmente
thought
fue,
it
porque
was
no, la tecnología no
easier
es
than
accesible
what
en
it
todos
turned out
lados
to be
como uno cree. Entonces
in
eso fue una
reality,
gran
because
limitación.
we tend to
Por
think
otro lado,
technology is
también
more
vemos que
accessible than it
integramos
is.
en estos
So that was
procesos
a
de
big
intersectorialidad
limitation.
los temas de la
On the other
planificación urbana
hand,
con estos
we
conceptos de
also
soluciones basadas en la
integrate issues of
naturaleza,
urban
donde lo que
planning
buscamos es
with
llevar el mensaje
nature-based
de cómo,
solutions.
recuperando
And
ciertos
our goal
ecosistemas
is
que
to
estuvieron
show
ahí,
how
podemos hacer de las ciudades
recovery
un
of
ambiente más
and
resiliente, un
restoration of these
ambiente más sano y por lo
ecosystems
tanto ayudar a
can
la
make a
salud
more
de los
resilient
pobladores. Y
environment
el
and a
otro
healthy
elemento que
environment
ya lo hemos
in those
mencionado y
cities,
que es
thus
totalmente
helping
relevante
improve the
es
health
justamente
of
este
the
trabajo
population.
de los
And
diferentes
something that
sectores,
is also
municipio con el
relevant
sector de salud,
is this
¿no?
work
Con el tema de riesgos
between the
urbanos, que son
municipal
diferentes
government,
niveles,
the
y luego
population.
también
We
con la
have different
comunidad para poder
levels
establecer estas
and
acciones
with
que en territorios son
researchers
bien
as well.
específicas. Hay que
And
determinar
so
exactamente qué es
having
lo que se
very
necesita
specific
para un vecindario
actions
o para
in the
una ciudad.
field for a specific
Y fue en ese
neighborhood
momento
or
que
a
en el
specific
2020
city.
apareció la pandemia.
And at that
Y no
point, in
podíamos estar
2020,
ajenos
the
a esta
pandemic
crisis,
came up.
¿no?
And of course, we could
global,
not be
también con la ciudad. Y inmediatamente empezamos a
outside of
trabajar
this.
a diseñar
in the city.
un
So
proyecto que quería
right away
definir
we
cuáles
started
serían los
designing a
insumos que se
project
necesitaría
to
para
define
tener un
what
sistema de alerta
input
temprano
we would need to
para
have
la
an
COVID-19,
early
pero que
warning
podía
system
extenderse
for
para cualquier
COVID-19,
otra
but that could
epidemia.
also be
Y es
used
así que
for any
trabajamos
other
en
epidemic.
conjunto y ahora con otros
And so we
actores
work
como el Servicio
together
Nacional de
and
Riesgos
also
y
with
Emergencia
other
y los
stakeholders,
servicios de
such
salud
as the
para poder
National
determinar
Emergency
estos
Service
temas de
and
vulnerabilidad, pero
healthcare
orientados
service
a la
to
COVID-19. Y es
determine
así que en el
vulnerabilities,
septiembre,
but
en octubre del
geared
2021, en el
toward
segundo año de la
COVID-19.
pandemia,
And so in
hicimos
October
este proyecto de los
2021, in the
insumos
second
para un
year of the
sistema de
pandemic,
alerta temprano para
we
la
created
COVID-19.
this project with
Y
the
entonces,
inputs
con la
necessary for
pandemia
an
en el
early warning
2020,
system for
lo que
COVID-19.
tratamos de hacer en este
So in
proyecto para definir los
2020,
insumos para
during
un
the
sistema de
pandemic,
alerta temprana para epidemias
we tried
es
to
conocer un
define
poco cuáles
those
son
inputs, and
estos
so we
disparadores de esa
tried
vulnerabilidad en el
to
contexto de la ciudad,
see what
para
are
lo
the
cual
triggers
tomamos
for the
muestras de sangre,
vulnerability in
hicimos
this
una
city.
aplicación
So we
para
took
poder
blood
hacer un
samples,
contact
we
tracing y
created
saber
an
por
app
dónde podían haber las
for
zonas de
contact
mayores riesgos.
tracing,
Se hicieron
to
encuestas
see what the
epidemiológicas de
areas with the
percepción y
higher
también
risks
explorando un
were.
poco la salud
We
mental,
also
así como
did some
evaluaciones
surveys. We
antropométricas
also
para
looked at
poder
mental
definir un
health.
poco cómo eran las condiciones
So
y cuáles podían ser
trying
algunos
to see
factores de
what the
riesgo a las
conditions were,
personas
what
que,
could be some risk
que podían
factors
tener
for the people
el
who
virus.
could
En total
contract the
hicimos más de
virus.
600
In
casos,
total,
¿no? Todo
we
esto cumplió
gathered
con los
more than
códigos
600
de
cases,
los códigos de
of
ética
course, following
establecidos,
the
¿no? Y los resultados
established
están
codes of
todavía en
ethics,
proceso
and the
de
results
análisis y
are
esperamos muy
still
pronto
being
publicarlos.
analyzed, but we hope to
Y
publish
esto
them
es
very
solamente un
soon.
archivo visual de lo que
And this
involucraba
is
esto, que también es un proyecto
a visual
transdisciplinario, donde
file
había todo un
of
tema de
everything that
tecnología,
was involved
había
in
un
this project.
registro,
It was
había un
also
diseño de una
a
encuesta, que es
TD
la parte
project.
estadística, había
We
factores
had
sociales, ¿no? La
statistics, we
instalación
had
de un
social
aplicativo,
factors,
tecnología, ¿no?
we
los
had
temas
an
de
app, so there
análisis de
was
muestra,
technology
¿no? La
as
evaluación
well. There was
antropométrica, que tenía que ver más
sample
con los temas nutricionales,
analysis,
y la parte de virología.
anthropometric
Entonces, todo esto
evaluations
implicaba
that had
un
more to
grupo
do with
de ciencia
nutritional
interdisciplinario muy
aspects
fuerte, pero también
and the
seguir trabajando con la
virology
comunidad a la
aspects.
cual teníamos que invitar
So
como voluntarios
we
a
continue to
participar en el
work with
estudio.
the community because we needed
Como
them to
conclusión y
come as
como mensaje
volunteers to
final
participate in this
es
study.
algunas de las
And
buenas
as a
prácticas que
conclusion and
podemos
final
compartir
message,
en
I
esta
wanted to share some of the
transdisciplinaridad en
good
la que hemos
practices that we
trabajado.
can share in
Podría
this
poner estos 4 puntos. El
transdisciplinarity.
primero es los arreglos institucionales.
And I
Para
have
nosotros ha
these
sido
4
bien
points to
importante
share.
establecer
The
algún
first
tipo
one
de arreglo
are
institucional
institutional
formal o social,
arrangements.
¿no?
For us,
Donde
it
hay
was
estos
very
convenios
important to have
marcos en el
some
mediano
sort
plazo
of
y hay convenios
framework
específicos de
agreement
corto plazo
for the
donde se
middle
asigna
term
fondo y establece
and the specific
claramente qué es lo que
agreements
vamos a
in the
hacer y cómo
short
lo vamos
term,
a hacer. Esto pues
where
con el
we
gobierno local
establish
nos
what
da
we're going
mucha
to do,
claridad,
how
pero
we're
además
going
nos
to
ha
do
ido
it.
ayudando a
This
desarrollar una
provides
dinámica
clarity
de
and also
camaradería, de
helps us
intercambio, de
develop
reuniones periódicas, por lo
our
tanto va
these
creciendo, ¿no? el
dynamic
trabajo y la
exchanges
confianza.
and
El
even
segundo es el
camaraderie
trabajo e
in
interacción
our
de las
work.
redes de conocimiento
The second one
interdisciplinarias.
is work
Básicamente
and
somos diferentes
interaction
grupos de
in
ciencia, ¿no?
knowledge
Entonces
networks.
también
So
aquí
because we
los
have
diferentes
different
grupos de
groups of
innovación,
different
los
areas
aquellos que trabajan con
working together,
diferentes
and so we
disciplinas,
have
¿no?
people working in different
Nos
disciplines,
unimos para trabajar
and
juntos y
we
tenemos
come
que
together
aprender a trabajar
to
juntos.
work,
No
and
siempre es
we
fácil al
need to learn
comienzo
how to
y
work
tenemos
with
que ir
each other.
aprendiendo el
It's not
lenguaje del
easy at
otro,
the
¿no?
beginning. We
Pero
need to
asimismo
learn the
aumentamos
language
nuestra
of the others.
capacidad
But we
cuando vemos que
also
podemos
increase
cruzar
our
esa
capacities
línea
when we
del
see that we
ecólogo
can
al
reach
epidemiólogo o al que
beyond that
trabaja con la
line,
estadística
the
o con el
ecologist,
sistema de información
working with an
geográfica, que es una herramienta
epidemiologist,
realmente que
or
ayuda
working
a
with the
integrar,
geographical
¿no? Y
information
también
system that
cómo
really
ahora
helps
incluimos
integrate
estos
all
impactos
of
del
these
clima
different
en
areas,
la salud,
and
y
how
esto
we
nos
include
obliga a
those
mirarnos desde
impacts
una
that the
perspectiva
climate
temporal
has on
y
health
espacial. Por lo tanto, vamos a
from
mirar cuáles son
both a
esos
time and
determinantes
space
ambientales,
perspective, so that we
sociales,
can
que van a
determine the
influir en el bienestar de la
social
comunidad. Y
and environmental
otro factor
determinant
importantísimo ha sido
factors,
la
determining
comunicación.
factors.
pero que tiene que ser
And
en un
something
lenguaje
that was also
sencillo,
very
¿no?
important was
aplicable
communication, but it needs to be
para que los
in a
productos
simple
académicos
language
sean
that
realmente
can be
entendidos
applied
y
so that
aplicados por el
the
personal
products,
municipal en este caso,
the
y mucho
academic
más si vamos a
products
llevar un
are
mensaje a la
understood
comunidad. Esto
by
implica también un trabajo
municipal
continuo de una
technicians
capacitación
and
sobre estos
healthcare
temas para que
workers.
podamos seguir
So we
mejorando y
need
elevando las
constant
capacidades de
ongoing
estos
training
actores locales.
and
Y
outreach to
finalmente,
improve the capacity in
poder
this
llevar
area.
insumos o
And
generar algunos
finally, to be
insumos para
able
instrumentos de
to
política. Entonces tenemos
generate
que trabajar en
input
aprender
for
policy
public
brief,
policies. So we
además
need
de
to learn
los papers
to
científicos que
write policy
realmente no
briefs
son de
aside from
interés, ¿no?
scientific
de los
papers, which
gobiernos
really
locales y la
aren't
comunidad,
of interest
pero
for
los
local
policy
governments
brief,
and for
las
communities, but
infografías,
policy
tipo de
briefs,
mensajes para la
infographics, these
comunidad,
kinds of
incluso para
messages
los niños con
are
juegos,
very
son
good
bien
for
importantes para
communities,
poder crear
even those that are
esta
geared towards
sensibilización
children.
hacia temas
It's
como
very good to
los
raise
sistemas de
awareness
alerta para las
about issues
epidemias, las
such
soluciones
as
basadas en la
early warning
naturaleza,
systems
la
for
información y
epidemics,
datos para las
nature-based
ciudades,
solutions,
que es algo que
information and data
quisiéramos
for
ir
cities,
avanzando y que
which
es
is something
importante
that
para
we want
poder
to
tomar
go
decisiones informadas.
deeper
Todavía hay
with,
mucho por
and it's
hacer,
important to
pero creo que
make
el camino
informed
se lo hace
decisions.
andando y
There's
estamos
still a
contentos
lot to
de
do,
poder haber
but
aprendido al camino
we
y
are
compartirlo esto con todos ustedes.
creating the
Gracias.
path as we go, and we're very happy to share this with you. Thank you so much.
Got our favorites, chicken.
Your mic is muted. Well, thank you, Mercy, for your video and for your case. Can you see my presentation? Not yet. Okay. I'm gonna try again.
Ok. Bien.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't know why I can't share my presentation. Okay, thanks, Mercy, again. And now we're going to have the presentation from Lily House Peters, Associate Professor of California State University, Gabriela Alonso Yáñez, Associate Professor from the University of Calgary, and Marshall E. Valentine, who has an MS in Master's in Science and a Bachelor in Technology, and she works with Jamaican women in coffee. So I give you the floor, ladies.
Buenos días. Oh.
Good morning.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Today, we are addressing this topic of actually doing TD research. And first of all, we'll have Marshall E. Valentine. She'll focus on science co-production. Next, please.
Vamos a empezar con un poll
So let's have a Zoom poll first. Which of the following best describes TD?
It asks which of the types of collaborative research that we discussed in session 1 have you experienced more in practice? Interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, or transdisciplinary? Mhm. I think show the poll. Okay. Bueno. So this is something that we often, I think, see and have experienced, which is that the majority of collaborative work that happens tends to fall into interdisciplinary work, and transdisciplinary research is harder to achieve. I think there's more and more focus, as we're seeing with this course, on achieving transdisciplinary research, but interdisciplinary research has tended to be the focus. So it's interesting for us to see a little bit more about the participants who are here and your experiences. And siguiente, the next slide.
Next, please.
Oh, this is bien. We also wanted to cover a little bit about the previous session before we begin the focus today on co-production. And so we thought that we could revisit the definition of transdisciplinarity when it's necessary or when it is the right approach, and how it produces the most favorable outcomes. So just to review, as we're going to move forward and continue with the theory, transdisciplinary research is an approach that really emphasizes integration. And that's one of the things we're going to discuss today across disciplinary fields, as well as the inclusion of more actors in the process, especially actors from beyond academics or academia, and really produces knowledge that is solutions oriented and takes seriously the specific context. And I think we saw that so well throughout Dr. Borber's presentation today, how important that specific context and the solutions oriented approach is to the success of this. And when is this the right approach? Because transdisciplinarity might not always be the right approach, as it does have many challenges. But when we have high uncertainty about social ecological problems, and when these are complex community localized or community-based problems. And here also, the outcomes are favorable, as we just saw with the case study, because they take into account real life social and ecological problems when they are designing the solutions, as well as that local context. And they really foster collaboration amongst this wide range of actors who are both from academic research and also from beyond academic research, including policymakers, ministers, politicians or policymakers, and community members themselves as important actors in these collaborations. And they strengthen relationships and hopefully will foster greater trust between communities and policymakers, which then is very important for the implementation of the solutions, of the decisions that are made, to have that trust and to have that community relationship. And we actually have a second Zoom poll before we begin the new information. So Zoom poll 2. And then I'll pass. Oh, great. And this one here asks you to just choose one, but which of the following descriptions best capture transdisciplinary research? Is it collaboration between researchers of different disciplines? Different disciplines working together to create innovations or solutions for a specific problem in common, or for a common problem in collaboration with non-academic actors? That's the second choice. And the third choice is investigations from a variety of disciplines that work kind of on their own without much collaboration between the disciplines. So please submit what you think best represents transdisciplinarity. Very good. So almost 96% are correct that transdisciplinarity is really about this working together. And we're going to talk more about this today, and about the idea of co-production of knowledge and integration as key themes. So with that, I'm going to pass to Marcia Lee, and we can move forward with the slides. Siguiente. Thank you. I think for the sake of time, the learning objectives are all on the website. So I think for us to move forward, just so we have time for questions. Okay, and then Marcia Lee.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Sorry, Lily. Good morning, everyone. All right, so we'll just move into knowledge co-production. And as we can see in transdisciplinary research, knowledge co-production does form an important part of research that seeks to promote this integration that we keep speaking of. And what is knowledge co-production? Let's start by defining it. It is simply a way of producing knowledge that is based on collaboration between different people to achieve common goals, right? It is action-oriented research with those who use it, and the involvement of stakeholders who are academic and non-academic. The knowledge co-production process is a collaborative process, as we will keep reiterating today, meaning it has engagement across domains and disciplines, and it takes into consideration different methods for the success of sustainability research. You'll see that throughout the co-production process that we move from collaboration to framing the problem to knowledge generation and exploration of practical impacts for individuals who are affected or stakeholders which are affected. Now, the knowledge co-production process is based on 4 principles, and I'll just quickly address those 4 principles. It has to be context-driven, meaning that there needs to be a clear set of issues that are recognized and are being addressed. And these issues they don't necessarily have to be local issues. They can be national, regional, or global issues. And they must consider the various interests and demands of different groups impacted by the issue being addressed in the research. In the determination of this context, you can ask yourself questions such as, how did the problem arise? How different changing circumstances in the world are affecting the work that is to be done? Who will be affected by the problem, and who will be affected by the processes and the outcomes of this project? And also, who has the authority? This is an important one. Who has the authority to enable or restrain actions throughout the life of the research, and how institutional and regulatory and policy frameworks can affect these issues identified? Now, providing the context in the initial stage of knowledge co-production, it allows for clear understanding of the goals, objectives, and outcomes by all stakeholders. And we could see in the previous case study that the context was made very clear in her introduction. Now, another principle is that the co-production process must have an appreciation for multiple ways of knowing and doing. And this is to promote diversity, which Lily will touch on in a few, and inclusion of, as we mentioned earlier, academics and non-academics, government and regulatory bodies, communities, and other dimensions of diversity, which includes gender, ethnicity, age, and nationality. It must also be goal-oriented, meaning that the research problem must be clearly defined and understood by all parties involved. And we could see that this is an important part of the process. And the case study previously indicated that this process took over maybe a year, but it was done. And then this process must be interactive. Frequent interaction among participants, including all players from the initiation stage, and keeping them engaged throughout the process. Of course, knowledge co-production.
I think
Yes.
we have to advance the slides. We stopped.
Oh no, it's fine. It's
Okay.
fine. I'm Gabby. Yeah. So sorry about that. So I'm just stating the main principles of knowledge co-production before we move on. It must include all stakeholders and then have them incorporate their new knowledge into the decision-making process. We can move on to slide 2 now. Now, this was a model created as a researcher in residence model, which was proposed because, as you realize, the knowledge co-production process, knowledge is able to reflect a wider range of perspectives and provide insights on issues affecting each group, which will, of course, be more relevant to local, regional, or national context. And therefore, you can easily translate into changes in policy and practices as it is created through this interaction process. Now, this research in residence model was proposed based on the premise that the researchers in healthcare organizations promote the building of relationships throughout daily interaction. And then through these relationships and immersion in the organization, the researchers will acquire the knowledge of the local context and collaborate with staff members to co-produce research that is relevant and responsive. Staff members and the host organization also will have greater ownership of the research and building trust. The research will be responsive to the changing needs of healthcare organizations. Can move on to slide 3. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, previous slide, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. All right, so of course, engaging with a broad range of stakeholders throughout the co-production process comes with challenges, as Lady mentioned earlier, and various challenges exist to the effective adoption of the co-production process. There are some common challenges and enablers related to citizen-centered co-production, that's co-producing with communities, right? And then these barriers include politics, financing and resourcing, access and inclusion, relationship building, and disengagement. And they're also enablers. So we'll just go through a few of these. We'll realize that where politics is concerned, there can be political interference and unpredictable political situations delaying the project work. However, on the other end, you can use the political structure to build on local political agendas once that knowledge is found. When it comes to relationship building, the interaction with the community there may be unfamiliarity with the community at hand because you don't understand their cultures and norms. There can be disrespect for local culture based on the approach taken. And then on the upper hand, you can allow for relationship building within the community while doing this work. And then it will also help to harness trust within the groups. We can move on to the next slide. Now, along with the example that Mercy gave earlier, I'll just move on to something else relating to agriculture of how the Jamaican women in coffee use this knowledge co-production process to drive change within the local Jamaican coffee industry. And we have a common goal of, providing a vehicle for members to channel resources for women to meet and gain knowledge, and a platform for women to develop their leadership skills. Because in Jamaica, the coffee industry is in a dire state, and there's need to develop programs to allow for redevelopment and improvement of the Jamaican coffee industry and the overall policy space in coffee. Next slide, please. So we begin our process as an organization. We formed in 2019, but we realized that we did not have a lot of knowledge as it relates to, or information or research as it related to women in coffee. And we didn't just want to go in the field and start making a change, because we needed to understand what changes need to be made to improve the overall industry, because we saw failing projects over and over again. So we firsthand needed to understand what these issues were. So in 2019, we conducted a research with 67 women, and this is a pilot research for a larger project that is to come. And we conducted this in different regions across the Jamaica Blue Mountain, right? And this was to get true data on the issues that existed within the coffee industry. Because as I mentioned, this information did not exist within the industry. From that research, we then designed a project that allowed us to secure funding for impact, right? For this research indicated to us really that, and again, it was not known. We realized out in the field during this research, and this was kind of our relationship building with the farmers, being out there, getting to know them, understanding their views, and then the surveys are building that trust. And then the surveys allowed us to see what data was there to allow us to make impactful change. So realized 52% of the women only had primary level education, and 30% of them had secondary level education. And also that 67% of them have never received any training in coffee production. And also that over 70% of these farmers, their family needs were not being met, and they were unable to afford the inputs for them to improve their practices or to employ sustainable farming practices. Next slide, please. So of course, we were in the field. So this is how we use co-production throughout our process. We were in the field, we build our relationships with the local communities. We understood their needs from the local perspective, because there are different regions within the Blue Mountain, and we needed to understand the challenges within different regions. So we understood their local perspective, their local challenges. We determined that context. And then we built trust with the women, because there are cases when they've been approached by other agencies who have promised them improvement in their livelihoods, and those did not come to fruition. So we used this opportunity over about a 3-month period to build that trust with them. And then from the results of the survey that I just mentioned, we created the project that got funding, but it didn't stop there. Upon receiving that funding, we also had sensitization sessions where we engaged with the farmers again to find out, okay, we found out that you have not received any training in coffee production. What kind of training do you need? So we met with them and they gave us that information. What kind of inputs do you need and utensils do you need? Sorry, equipment is needed to fulfill your farming practices. And then they mentioned that they needed training in harvesting of coffee, soil management, sustainable farming practices. They mentioned that they needed help with fertilizer and inputs. They needed innovative ways of controlling pests and diseases. So from that information, we went back, we collaborated with some field officers, experts in the field in the different areas mentioned, and we also collaborated with the Jamaican Agricultural Commodities Regulatory Authority, which runs the coffee industry board in Jamaica. And then we developed training material to train these farmers. We went out into the field with them, and then we disseminated this training and provide the inputs that they needed. Throughout this process, we continued to engage with all the stakeholders. And then after the project was implemented, in about 6 to 7 months after, we saw the solutions being implemented on the farms. We saw that production was being increased and the conservation practices were being implemented, and farmers were sharing that information with their neighboring parties. And this also helped to build some confidence and trust in the Jamaican women in coffee by the farmers through this collaboration. And we are continuing with this implementation of this project in different regions as the years go by. All right, I think we're on a Zoom call. And then I'll pass over to Gabby. All right, Lily, if you could just lead the poll for me, please. Thank you.
So this Zoom poll is asking about what are the key aspects of transdisciplinary research that were just identified in the case study example from Jawick that Marcia Lee was discussing. And you can choose up to 2. So knowledge of the local context, constructing or building, relationship building, locally specific solutions, or research and knowledge co-production. So choose up to 2 of the ones you think were most key. Entonces, Gabby. Wow, okay. So tied for knowledge of the local context and relationship building, but also we saw strongly locally specific solutions and the co-production of this research together with the community members. Siguiente.
Next slide, please.
Gracias. Gabriela.
Yeah,
Thank you, Gabriela.
Ánimo. It's good to see everyone. Hola, a todos. Otra vez gracias a Lourdes.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again, Lourdes and Anna, who are helping us with the interpreting, and Anwar and Haley for the logistics support. And now I'm going to discuss something that has to do with theory, but also some of the things that were mentioned in the cases presented, and something that is being studied recently is the building of alliances in the science policy frontier that has a lot to do with transdisciplinary work in research. And this has to do with involving a very wide range of stakeholders with different perspectives and work affiliations. And that is one of the issues that researchers face most recently. These building of alliances help temper or reduce tension and reach consensus. if you remember in the first session, we discussed transdisciplinary research as a way of life, a way of approaching research that involves an effort to build a relationship with other stakeholders in a much more horizontal manner. So something that was very significant for me from Mercy's presentation was how alliances and how governance is important, and how this co-production and involving both formal and informal arrangements was very significant. And this is very important for TD work. And Victor Galaz, who is a researcher who has a TD work on financial systems and the intervention of socio-ecological systems. It's a very interesting work, and he calls this unexpected alliances, because he works with journalists, with very diverse communities, and he includes their work into his research. The next slide, please. Thank you. Something that is also very important and that has started coming up most recently in TD work is equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think most of us here are very familiarized with these initiatives for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this means that community participation in research is essential to promote equity in diverse communities. In the Global South, we are aware of the importance and of how this has always been a challenge for us. So we need to increase and to open up opportunities for participation, prioritizing marginalized communities that are usually not involved in the development of research. As we said in the last session as well, this also has to do with a political side of how science is developed and what kind of knowledge has legitimacy in terms of research, and also in connection with the co-production of knowledge is the interest in reaching a balance about the ways of being in the world, the protocols that we have for different communities to explain social and physical phenomena. And there are different commitments, institutional commitments to diversity. There are researchers stating that these equity efforts sometimes need to be supported by institutions, because that is the way to establish genuine equitable relationships. And with Lilia Marshall, we have looked at how institutional structures sometimes restrict the ability of researchers to include different communities, whether it has to do with the allocation of resources or the ethical involvement of these communities. So we thought it was important to mention that the basis for this equity, diversity, and inclusion and issues has to do with the colonial approach, decolonial approach, something that in the South we have been discussing for years. And so we make a distinction between post-colonialism and decolonial. So the way that we look at our knowledge and our work as researchers. The references that we have already mentioned from the beginning behind our work, Epistemologies of the South, cognitive or epistemic justice. This means that all knowledge in the world is valid and is useful to face global challenges. And in connection with this principle of the fabrics of life as well. Next slide, please. And this as a pillar, I think this is part of the co-production process in a team. So when we decide to do a TD work, or each of you in your teams, when you're developing a project, you need to have an open dialogue about what equity means for all of you, and as well as diversity and inclusion. And so the definition that we suggest and that we use is that this is the definition is that it's a process used to systematically examine how differences in sex, gender, race, ethnicity intersects with but to create the identity of a person. And so the way we use that in our research is that is a commitment that is periodically reviewed in the work in our research. And of course, also taking into account exchange and work with other people. And also here, the networks that we build for our work also play a significant role. So when we say communities, we don't necessarily mean an indigenous community or a rural community, but any group of people who are in the area or the field or the site where you are working, because they are the ones that have the better knowledge about the reality in that place.
I think that's it. Or we have another poll. Lily?
Sí, siguiente y otra votación de Zoom. Sí.
Yes, we have another Zoom poll.
Okay. And this question asks, in your opinion, which of the following points is the most important for knowledge co-production? All of the interested parties share the interest and are in agreement with the problems that they are facing. The participation of all kind of interested parties begins at or starts at the initiation of the study and continues throughout. To be assured that these processes guarantee that there's continuous learning together throughout the study, and that those responsible for political decision-making and the communities have a strong role in the collaboration and in coming up with the viable solutions. So choose one, even though many might sound good, but just your opinion, which. Okay. All right, if we could show the poll for the, okay. Wow, very interesting. Two ties here. So we see that participation, for especially beginning at the start, the initiation of the study is extremely important, as well as making sure that policymakers and community members are part of this process as well. But as we see, all four of these are important parts of the co-production of knowledge. So in that way, it wasn't meant as a trick question, but just to start to think about these important pieces. And then we're interested just getting to know all of the teams better and the participants as to what your focus is as well. So, okay, for the sake of time, get the next slide. Siguiente. Oh, gracias. Okay, so we're gonna just finish up
Son
in a
12:15, Lili.
sí, yo sé. I'll go kind of
It's
quickly
12:15, Lily.
a couple slides here. So, and we can begin when we return with a review of this, but so that we have time for questions. So we want to share some of the key components of transdisciplinary integration. And we'll continue to discuss this as well as we continue on, as well as best practices for this integration. But we really like this kind of quote here that disciplines must do more than work in parallel. So that's what we might see with multidisciplinarity, which you see at the bottom in that picture, is many different disciplines working in parallel. But what we're doing with transdisciplinary research is we're actually getting these disciplines to interact, to communicate, and really to recombine their knowledge to produce new and innovative theories and methodologies and syntheses, which we believe can go beyond what is possible in multidisciplinary or even interdisciplinary research. And so from a review of the literature, we've been synthesizing some of the key important components of this integration. And one of that is really focusing on creating common ground. And this is important too, as we are working with more diverse actors, including bringing policymakers into the research process, bringing local actors into the research process, as well as scholars from many different research disciplines. As we've been discussing, designing the questions, the research questions collaboratively and from the beginning. So not engaging communities at the very end of the process or somewhere in between, but actually from the beginning, designing the very research questions together. Also learning together and constructing a common language with this diverse team. And we've also found in our almost 10 years of transdisciplinary research experience that this learning together and joint work is really critical for teams to build these relationships, but also to begin to have a common language that goes beyond or across disciplines to be able to really think differently and reframe the problem. Also, exploring differences and commonalities in knowledge systems is really important. So getting to know how everybody else in the group thinks, how they know the world, and how they kind of understand the problem. Also, managing and nurturing internal communication, and we'll be speaking about communication plans in a future session, and developing shared methodologies and common interpretation. So this goes along with co-designing the research questions collaboratively together, and then understanding the different types of methodologies that teams use or different disciplines might use, and coming up with kind of shared research methods. So this can be hard work, and we'll continue to talk about ways to facilitate this, but these are some of the things that are really key to success in TD. Next slide, siguiente. Okay, so I also want to introduce one way of thinking about, or a good system for starting to understand how do we work with diverse data streams in transdisciplinary research. And one of the issues that we get is as we have more and
Lili,
more...
un minuto, gracias.
Okay. As we have more and more disciplines working together, we have more and more diverse types of data. And how we actually are able to get these data, right, the interoperability of the data is another great challenge in transdisciplinary science. And so there's a really interesting method that has recently emerged called FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this is a tool that helps teams to better manage and synthesize their diverse data sets. And we saw in Dr. Borbor's presentation, all of these different kinds of data, from GIS data to social science data, people's stories and their anecdotes, qualitative, quantitative. You begin to have these really diverse data sets. And so this begins to really talk about how do we collect and prepare the data? how do we store the data? How do we communicate this data? How do the data relate to each other? And so given that it looks like with time, we want to have 10 minutes for questions. What we'll do is the next TD session, we will begin here and then continue to build. So in that case, vamos a empezar con preguntas, pienso. Gracias.
Okay, let's start with the questions now then. Thank you. Thank you, Lily. So we still have a few more minutes to ask questions. We have selected one question for each of the speakers.
Marcia está aquí.
Les pedimos, por favor, les pedimos, por favor, que sean
Please be as brief as possible, because as Mercy is here as well, we can ask her question. Mercy, Manuel Miller asks, which is the difference between exposure and threat? That's a great question. We believe that threat within climate issues has to do with the event's magnitude. And we use, for instance, precipitation precipitation levels, and we also use anomaly as a variable. Anomalies allow us to compare a specific point in time with mean data. So that's threat. Regarding exposure, we relate what is happening to this event or the population, how the proximity level as well. But this depends on the type of object of study. If things are different for different types of viruses, for instance, and this is also related to climate change. So basically, threat intensity exposure is related to proximity, the place and the proximity of the population. Thank you, Mercy, always very clear. Question number 2, Lily. On average, how long does a co-production and TD process take? For instance, for one of the cases that has been presented.
Marshall maybe can speak to this concretely with the work with the coffee farmers, but
Tenemos una pregunta para Marshall.
We have a
Sure.
specific question addressed to Marshall, actually.
All right.
oh yeah, the length of time that it took to build the relationships with the coffee.
Yeah. Sure. So it took us about so we're still building that relationship. So it took us about, for the field survey that we did, that process took about 4 months. However, once that pilot study was done, we continued engaging with the farmers. And each time we go out in the field to either visit the farms or execute training activities, we continue to build that relationship and we continue to get information from them. So it depends on, from my experience, the information you want at what time, and then it's all based on your timeline also, like how much time do you have to do your research. But with a proper written project, I think you can go in and get out in like 2 to 3 months based on your approach with the community, because there are challenges, but then you have to have plans in place to address those challenges that you might face when you go in these communities. For us, our relationship is ongoing and we continue to build that data to continue to improve the industry as these challenges are also changing with time. Not sure if that answers your question.
Bien, gracias, Marshall.
Thank you, Marshall. Now, one more question, and it's up to you who answers the question. Why do at the EDI definition we exclude the economic, social, and political aspects?
Oh, the EDI.
Yes, EDI.
Pues yo creo que no se excluye. Más bien es
I don't think it's excluded.
que
I
haya
think
una
there is an emphasis on access inequality, and also when it comes to legitimating knowledge. We have structures because we are academicians that validate knowledge, okay, and this is included in the IPCC. A challenge when it comes to integrating indigenous knowledge is that there is no documentation protocol, or they don't have a protocol that is similar to ours. So this knowledge is not excluded, let's say, but rather it shows the problem of unequal access to knowledge. Thank you, Gabriela. And one more question, the last one, which is much more specific. And it reads, Andrea Lobardo would like to know which surveys were used, also how the platform you used to send out the surveys, and what was the participation percentage in the surveys as described by Marshall. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, so we use the questionnaire format. We designed questionnaires, and we had been sponsored 10 Salesforce licenses. That's a customer relationship management platform. We were awarded 10 free licenses under the Salesforce nonprofit package, and that's how we designed the questionnaires. We did not send the questionnaires to farmers because based on where they're located, they may not have access to the internet. So this was part of our relationship building where we all, as board members, self-funded, went out into the field and engaged with the farmers face-to-face. So in that sense, we had 100% participation because all farmers that were approached, they were very receptive and they were appreciative of us coming out there because the roads to get to the farms in the Blue Mountains are horrific. I had to come out my car at one point and ask someone else to drive it for me because I couldn't trek to the location. So they were very appreciative of us coming out in the field. So we engaged with them face to face. We used our tablets, used the Salesforce platform to enter the information in the database, and then we used that to analyze the data also.
Bien, bueno, primeramente.
Great. Thank you. So first of all, thank you for how well you have managed our time. Thank you for the excellent presentations, Marshall, Lily, Gabby, and Mercy. Your presentations have been excellent. Thank you to our interpreters as well. That it's no easy job. And thank you to the 104 participants that joined us and are still here with us today. We have only had 3 people getting disconnected. This has been truly successful. Thank you to everyone, and we'll see each other again on Thursday. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Carlos, for moderating this session. Thank you.